A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Ephesians. Brothers and sisters, I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth is named, that he may grant you, in accord with the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in the inner self, and that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you, rooted and grounded in love, may have strength to comprehend with all the holy ones what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. Verbum Domini. The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want.
The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. In verdant pastures he gives me repose. Beside restful waters he leads me, he refreshes my soul.
The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want.
Even though I walk in the dark valley, I fear no evil. For you are at my side with your rod and your staff that give me courage.
The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want.
You spread the table before me in the sight of my foes. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows.
The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want.
Only goodness and kindness follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for years to come.
The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want.
Alleluia, 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 alleluia. Blessed are you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth. You have revealed to little ones the mysteries of the kingdom. Alleluia, alleluia, alleluia.
Dominus vobiscum. Lectio Sancti Evangelii secundum Matteum.
Gloria tibi, Domine.
At that time, Jesus answered, I give praise to you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, for although you have hidden these things from the wise and the learned, you have revealed them to the childlike. Yes, Father, such has been your gracious will. All things have been handed over to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son wishes to reveal him. Come to me, all you who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart, and you will find rest for yourselves. For my yoke is easy and my burden light. Verbum Domini.
Nos tibi Christe.
Jesus, who calls us to follow him, wants our hearts to be conformed to his heart. But this could be very difficult. Our hearts may be divided. Perhaps we may have our sights, maybe have our hearts on things of the world, the flesh and the devil. Or perhaps, on a person, place, or thing that is preventing us from fully giving our heart over to Jesus Christ the Lord, to surrendering to him, to allowing him to conform our heart to his heart. Well, this could be a very difficult struggle for us. But there is hope. We have a holy saint we celebrate today, Saint Margaret Mary of Alacoque. And even this holy saint, whom Jesus revealed the mysteries of his sacred heart, struggled with a divided heart at one point in our life. So even this holy saint had some difficulty. And she shows us how. She gives us strength in following Jesus and in conforming our hearts to his. St. Margaret Mary of Alacoque, she was blessed to have these revelations from Jesus. It was Jesus who revealed to her, through 4 revelations, the importance and necessity of the people of God having devotion to the Sacred Heart. Jesus came to her and told her how much his heart burned for love of us. He encouraged her to make known or make popular the devotions to the Sacred Heart. Having a holy hour, once a week, or in certain times, specifically on Thursday nights, First Friday, receiving Holy Communion on First Fridays in honor of the Sacred Heart. Also, having the image of the Sacred Heart in your home and making devotion in the households. Also, telling her about a feast day in honor of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, which would be after Corpus Christi Sunday. So it was these things and others that the Lord told her to write about, and of course to encourage devotion of his Sacred Heart. And this of course again is very necessary, because with the heart, as Scripture points out, it's in the heart where the will is where the will is generated, where our motivations, our intentions come from. Remember when Jesus says, "Out of the heart, the mouth speaks." So it starts there in the heart, is that the will. This is where our will is formed. Okay, and going back to Saint Margaret Mary, well, she was born in the year 1647. I believe it was on July 22nd, 1647. And her parents were devout people. She had brothers, sisters, and they of course were a devout Catholic family. At a very early age, as a toddler, Saint Margaret Mary, of course, loved the Lord very much, and had special devotions and special prayers she would pay to Jesus and Mary. And at the age of 4 years old, she vowed to live in chastity for the Lord, to give her life totally up for him, in service and a love for him. Okay, so as the time went on, her father died, about when she was 8 years old. And after her father's death, her uncle took the property of her father in her household. It became his. So this uncle and his family took over their entire estate, the estate of her father, But, he wasn't very charitable. Neither was his family. In fact, they confined Margaret, Mary, her mother, and her siblings to the house. And they treated them as like servants and slaves. They couldn't do anything without permission. And then her mother became very ill, was suffering from various ailments. And, Margaret's Mary mother depended on her for care and for help. They're very close to each other. So as the years went by and the struggle increased, it was very intense at times where it became very even abusive. But yet, God was giving Margaret Mary so many graces at a very young age. Even before her teenage years and going into her teenage years, to forgive, to let go of these things and to pray for them. But she needed permission to do every single thing again, even to go to Mass. And as she moved into her teenage years, she would want to go to Mass, she would want to go pray in front of the Blessed Sacrament. And the family would say, no, we're not going to let you do that. We know what your intentions are. We know that you want to go out and to meet boys and to be infatuated and all of this stuff. And so, they wouldn't allow her sometimes even to go to Mass. Well, it was the family's intention that even her mother, and then, of course, this family that was taking control of her, that she be married. And it was even her mother herself. Her mother thought that she would be relieved of some of her sufferings if Margaret Mary was married to somebody. That way, she wouldn't have to worry about her so much, and that she would be taken care of by her all the time. But Margaret Mary desired to be a nun. Well, eventually, there was a pull here, and that's where her heart started to become divided. Okay. Now, her family wanted her to marry. Her mom wanted her to marry. And so, because of the pressure, she eventually resigned to what they were saying. But yet, Jesus beforehand was calling her to be a nun, and she knew that. This, remember, started at the age of 4 years old. And so she said, she made a decision at one point and says, I was only 4 years old. I was too young. I didn't know what I was saying. So, I'm just going to go off and, start to look for men. Go out in the world and, have a little fun and all that. She'd go to the carnivals and things. Eventually men started to, find her very interesting. And very, it was very good and charming, good men that would approach, very handsome looking. So there was this great fight in her. At the same time, she was hearing messages from the Lord. And even throughout her young years, she would hear the voice of God. But even so, even with all that, she would not give herself immediately to God because of the pressures around her. Well, even her family got involved and says, if you become a nun, if you don't get married, you're going to kill your mother. They would tell her things like that. And then we can't forget about the devil, who was throwing all sorts of temptations at her. Again, with her mother, with saying that she would never make it as a nun, she'd be a better wife and all of that. So, there was a great pull in the heart. And finally, she was, she was dressed so nicely, and she was already becoming a little vain. And she was at one carnival, and then, she was at some kind of pageant or something, and she looked out, and she saw the Lord. She saw Jesus right there, who was scourged, bleeding, with the crown of thorns. And right there, this brought her great conviction. She says, oh my gosh. And then a little later, the Lord would speak to her and says, what about the vow you made to me? Even at 4 years old, he says, I protected you from so much. Now, it's time that you said yes. And so finally, with this conviction, after these years had passed, she said yes to him and says, okay, I will now enter the convent. She did penance. She would go to the Holy Mother and ask for her help and protection, her prayers as she went forward. But even with that, that still was difficult, because now, here came the pressure and everything else just kind of doubled. Everything just increased. But she was resolved to do the will of God and become a nun. Finally, her family gave into this. But they wanted her to be an Ursuline nun. But she didn't feel called to be an Ursuline nun. So she became a nun of the Visitation. And then from there on, she eventually entered the order after much suffering, but God took care of the rest. So, what does this tell us, my brothers and sisters, is that, hey, even the greatest of saints suffered from these things, from overcoming a divided heart. But her example shows us that it is possible for all of us. You know, it's a matter of faith, of believing God that He will take care of things. Well, how come we just don't give it all up? Sometimes, how come we just don't give it all for God? You know, give Him, surrender everything to Him. Say, okay, conform my heart to your heart. Well, Jesus today is telling us, He says, He speaks about His own heart. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm meek and humble of heart. See, this is it right here. Sometimes we like to hold on to our stubbornness. We like to hold on to our prideful ways. And we don't want sometimes to be totally conformed to the heart of Jesus because we don't know where it's going to take us. Okay, we may have all the pressures of the world like St. Margaret Mary. You know, think about, well, what's going to happen? You know, maybe our family's telling us things. Hey, you know what? Don't give yourself to God. You know, you go to church too much. You know, stop this. You're better off when you're in the world. You look better. You look happier. You know, all these pressures. Let it go. You know, give it to the Lord. You know, this is a way. I mean, this may feel like a certain darkness or whatever, but God will do great things out of it, because it is in this time where He builds our faith, where He strengthens us in His love. Okay, and where ultimately our heart is becoming conformed to His, because now we're believing Him. We're willing to take the step of faith. Okay, and follow Him even deeper. So you know, don't let the pressures of the world or the pressures of people, you know, decide whether or not you should give your heart totally to Jesus the Lord and conform to Him. You know, believe God. He did great things through Margaret Mary. He will do it through you too. Well, maybe not in His visions and revelations and all that, but you know, but great works of charity and goodness. This will only increase. So, you know, one thing else is that, you know, Jesus showing St. Margaret Mary Alacoque the love from His heart. You know, that Jesus, He suffered, and that He, you know, that He had this in His heart, His sacred heart, that His heart was pierced. But yet, you know, as it is pierced, only goodness comes out of it, only love. You know, this is this goodness that, you know, we see. Remember, blood and water flows out of the heart of Jesus, but this goodness is a grace we receive. It is ongoing. It is all love for us. Though we did that through our sins, pierced that heart, but yet goodness flows. This is the mercy of Jesus. This is a goodness for each and every one of us. This is how we know we're truly loved. That God reaches out to us. This is that we are in His heart. And this is what He wants for us, that we enjoy everything about His heart, His love, His mercy, you know, for us to have. That's why, come to me. I am meek and humble of heart. That means a heart full of goodness, a heart full of gentleness, a heart that will soothe us, that will calm the anger, that will give us peace. Okay, it's all love here. And so all the more we should want to abandon ourselves and surrender to Jesus the Lord, who's meek and humble of heart. You know, one of the greatest prayers we can pray to help us do this is just the very simple prayer. It's been known in the church for many years. Jesus, meek and humble of heart, make my heart like unto thine. You know, this prayer like this, conforming our hearts to Jesus, is so needed in this world today. There's just so much anger, so much unhappiness, you know, so much unfaithfulness out there. But this can all be soothed, all be remedied through the heart of Jesus Christ, through the love that comes from the heart. So, my brothers and sisters, today at this Mass, give your heart to Jesus. If we've been away from the church, or we're struggling, be inspired by this example of St. Margaret Mary, and know that all things are possible with God, and that you're in His heart here, and that that surrendering to Him will only give you peace, only give you a life of love, a life of love in the heart of Jesus Christ. God bless you all.